Welcome to my channel. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video a like up. From the collapse of his wash facility to the construction of a huge $1.4 million gold haul, Parker Schnabel did this. Startled everyone. Let's get started. The day at Dominion Creek was hectic. During the first full week of operation, Parker's team was hard at work checking out their new wash plant Roxanne, while Tatiana was still getting acclimated to it. To save the team from having to do it by hand, Tyson and Mitch installed a conveyor at the end that flung out the undesirable soil. This simplified things, particularly for Tatiana, who could now obtain pay dirt from a greater distance. At first, Tatiana fed the plant 250 yards of pay dirt per hour. As the evening wore on, Parker appeared with a fresh concept. He informed Alex that they had to move more quickly. Alex, who was knowledgeable, inquired as to whether there was enough water to manage it. As obstinate as ever, Parker demanded that they up the feed rate by 20%. Since more soil ultimately meant more gold and more gold meant more money for everyone, Alex decided to agree rather than dispute. They continued in the hopes that the bet would be profitable after that. Alex raised the amount of water pumped to the plant from 2,800 to 3,000 gallons, while Parker went ahead and upped Roxanne's feed rate to 300 yards per hour. Washing the more filth that was now coming through took a minute. Parker then told Tatiana about the raise and departed. Tatiana had to put in more effort to overcome that increase because the belts were now moving far more quickly than the team was used to. However, an unforeseen event occurred. Water began to flow from the distribution box and reach the floor. It appeared as though the plant's distribution box had clogged, absorbing more water and debris than it could manage. Tatiana called Mitch after seeing this to see whether you had a copy. Yes, Mitch, go ahead. Hello, just wanted to let you know that the distribution box is leaking some water. It will eventually reach the floor. Therefore, I'm not sure if it's something to be worried about. I'm heading over to take a look at it from Mitch's point of view. The factory was operating smoothly at first until Parker raised its rate. At this point, the plant was 20% above capacity and everything was spilling over onto Mitch. When working with a plant like Roxanne, patience was essential. However, Parker was never good at patience. By raising the water flow and feed rate, Parker filled the distribution box to overflowing. The plant system was having a lot of trouble, and it was not good at all that the dirt was boiling over. The crew didn't want erosion from the water leaking out because it would undermine the ground below and force them to remove the plant and rebuild it elsewhere. This would require a significant amount of time and effort that could be utilized to feed the plant and extract additional gold. Mitch had to find a way to efficiently provide water while still having enough to wash the extra dirt passing through the plant. I'm going to keep the feed rate constant and replace a few nozzles in the pre-wash. We will just alter the area where the water sprays, the material it strikes, and the way the water spreads, which impacts everything below. Thus, we will simply rapidly shut down the factory here. However, in order to do all of this, they had to stop everything to make sure that no more was entering. Roxanne had to wait for the feeder to run empty before adding any more soil. Mitch had to work quickly to resolve the issue. The facility was closed, which meant Parker wouldn't be pleased because no money was coming in. The primary problem was that Roxanne's specially constructed spray bars were left open, allowing too much water to flow and creating a mess. Mitch had a strategy. In order to break up and cleanse the dirt more quickly while using less water, he intended to install nozzles on each spray bar. If done correctly, the rocks would emerge clean and flared nozzles would be used to regulate the water flow. To appropriately move the substance they were going to see, the water would distribute evenly and create a constant flow. In order to get the plant operating as efficiently as possible, Mitch had to report to Parker about the difficulties he had faced. If the idea worked, Mitch could now return the pump to 2,800 grams per minute while keeping the feed rate at 300 in an hour. Chris Dumet recommended that they weigh some gold. Livestheour had been flowing on Australia Creek for a month at this point. After measuring the gold, they received roughly 240,000, averaging 145 per week. For them, that wasn't a horrible week. Parker's gold came next, followed by rocks and large red, which was Parker's primary source of income, averaging over 370 ounces per week despite the downtime that Parker's team had to endure while fixing rocks in. Even so, they hit $453.80, or about $120,000 in a single day. It was the season's largest harvest, valued at over $14 million, and everyone was pleased. But Parker's shocking moments weren't limited to this. Everybody who has an absurd quantity of gold, Parker Schnabel and his group have just discovered something amazing. An abandoned mine that had untapped gold had been abandoned in a hurry. Treasure that has been waiting for years to be taken by an interested party. Sufficient to appear thrilled by their finding that they labored quickly and extracted gold at an astonishing rate, but the deeper they dug, the more they sensed there was a problem. Unusual symbols, strange tools, and unsettling signals began to appear. It seemed as though someone had left a message long ago to not dig here. Parker, however, wasn't one to pass up a gold mine. He continued to dig deeper despite the warnings. The more disturbing things got, the more I marveled at the pans we had downstream. They are simply removing it from the riverside after we have spent millions of dollars trying to reach that kind of terrain. Insane. Then they discovered something that completely altered everything. The mine first appeared to be the biggest prize. There were no traces of antiquated mining equipment, and thick veins of gold coated the rock walls, gleaming even in the low light. No contamination with mercury. All that is waiting to be taken is pure raw gold. Parker boldly asserted every tiny detail, but there is always a cost to gold. What they found was more than just treasure. It was a mystery encased in danger. It made Parker think of a story his grandfather had told him about how, one day, his grandfather had an unbelievable gold haul 42 in a single day, but that everything changed 4 hours later. I remember growing up too, how my grandfather had a 42-ounce day and they flew for 4 hours under the same circumstances as now. Parker's crew had no permafrost, no million-dollar machines burning fuel, just them, and as the dust cleared, a curious sound came from the ground. It wasn't simply a mine, though. The mine and an increasing feeling of unease. They believed they were simply searching for gold, but instead they had discovered something that was never supposed to be there. Hold on, there's more. In contrast to previous mining operations they had experienced, this one involved straightforward, efficient digging that yielded rewards in a matter of hours. They had extracted over 100 grams of gold, and something about it felt strange. As they dug deeper, they began to wonder who had abandoned the mine and why no one had ever returned if it was as good as it appeared. Then, just as they arrived at what should have been the most profitable area, they discovered something they weren't expecting, proof that they weren't the first to discover these riches and that those who had arrived earlier had departed quickly when Parker's team went to clear the site. They understood that this was more than just a deserted mine. It was a historical time capsule. The tools they discovered were too sophisticated for the era, and something more valuable than gold had been left behind, and the rock formations didn't fit contemporary geological maps. Parker spent millions of dollars trying to find gold by sifting dirt from riverbanks as if it were simple, but each scoop served as a reminder of how easily things may go wrong or as a step toward luck. Parker had previously found himself in a difficult situation, but this time he felt a peculiar energy that he had mentioned in the past. Parker's instincts urged him to continue going to him and his crew even though miners had tried and failed. It seemed like the perfect gold mine. Since they didn't know why anyone could depart, they had won it all along. In a hurry, such a rich place, my greatest suggestion was the best thing they could do. But as they worked out the rest, the ground became more unstable the deeper they dug, and then they discovered that something had been waiting for centuries beneath the surface. They then hid the last layer of bedrock and either struck it rich or left empty-handed, and there was gold, more than they had anticipated, more than anyone in the area had discovered in decades.